A cop punched a 74-year-old black grandmother in the face. But what she did next didn't just shock the courtroom. It moved a nation. The heat in Jackson was the kind that clung to your back like regret, thick, stubborn, and impossible to shake. The asphalt on West Gallatin Street shimmered beneath the Mississippi sun as an old woman named Mavis Coleman pushed her squeaky metal cart up the sidewalk. Inside were bundles of collard greens, homegrown tomatoes, and a jug of sweet tea she hoped to trade for bus fare. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a worn yellow dress. Her back hunched slightly, not from weakness, but from decades of work, motherhood, and survival. Her fingers were calloused, her eyes sharp. At the corner of the gas station, she paused to catch her breath. Her legs trembled. The sun blurred her vision. She reached for the plastic chair someone had left out front, but before she could sit, the world tilted. She collapsed gently, not like a fall but a folding. Her hand still gripped the cart handle as her knees hit the pavement. The sweet tea spilled. A tomato rolled into the gutter. Across the street, Officer Travis Holt sat in his patrol SUV, sipping an energy drink and scrolling through his phone. His gaze lifted just in time to see Mavis on the ground. His first thought, here we go again. He slammed the door and walked over, aggressive from step one. You can't lay here, ma'am. Mavis lifted her head slowly. I didn't mean to. You obstructing the sidewalk? Are you all right? Or is this one of those? I fell. Now pay me things. I'm just dizzy. Stand up, he barked. She tried. Her arm shook. He grabbed her elbow roughly. Let go of me, she whispered, frightened. And then the fist. Not a shove. Not a push. A closed fist to her cheek, sending her sideways into the cart. From across the street, Kennedy Hill, on her way home from summer class, paused in horror. Her phone was already out. She had been filming for her vlog about local life. Without hesitation, she flipped the camera, zoomed, and recorded. Somebody help her, she cried out, but no one moved. The officer grabbed Mavis's wrists and cuffed her as if she were a threat. Kennedy didn't blink. She filmed it all, the blood, the sweat, the bruise swelling instantly. Then, silently, she uploaded the video. The caption read, He punched her. She couldn't even stand. #Justice for Mavis. The video of Officer Travis Holt punching Mavis Coleman had already reached over 230,000 views by the time the sun began to set on Jackson, Mississippi. People had shared it across platforms with hashtags like #JusticeForMavis, #ProtectBlackElders, and #EndPoliceViolence. But the official response? Silence. No statement from the Jackson Police Department. No local news coverage beyond a vague one-line bulletin about a disturbance involving a pedestrian. Mavis, meanwhile, had been taken to the hospital with a fractured cheekbone, a dislocated wrist, and blood in her eye. She said very little when the nurses asked, just shook her head, tears soaking into the side of the pillow. At home, Kennedy Hill sat on the edge of her bed, her phone buzzing every few seconds with comments and reposts. People were asking for her to speak out, to do interviews. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted the world to know what had happened. Her mother, Denise, a cafeteria worker at the local school, came into her room holding a folded newspaper. It had nothing on the front about the video. Instead, a headline about summer droughts. Denise sighed and placed the paper down. They're hoping it fades. That people forget, she said softly. But one person did not forget. Hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., federal judge Malcolm Reeves scrolled through his phone in his chambers after a long day in court. He rarely used social media. But that evening, a former student of his had sent the link directly. He clicked, and there she was. The old woman lying on the sidewalk, trembling, the officer towering above her. The angle wasn't perfect, but Malcolm saw what mattered. The moment the fist connected, the way her body folded inwards like a memory being erased. He gasped, and then he stared. Longer than expected, because something about her face stirred something in him. A memory, a smell of lavender soap. A summer long ago in Mississippi. He opened the file drawer in his desk, hand shaking, and pulled out an old photo album, buried beneath years of trial transcripts. On the second page, there was a photo of a young boy, smiling wide, standing next to a much younger version of her, Mavis. She had been the woman who raised him when his mother died. She had bathed him, fed him, taught him how to tie a tie. He whispered her name now, barely audible. Mavis. Mavis Coleman. He stood abruptly, knocking over a cup of pens. He didn't care. A part of his past, the part he owed everything to, had just been brutalized in broad daylight. and the system said nothing. That would change. Back in Jackson, Mavis refused to speak to reporters. She had never trusted the media, not since the time they twisted her words during a nursing home protest decades ago. She kept the curtains drawn, sat with an ice pack against her face, and stared out at her wilting tomato plants. But then came the knock. Kennedy stood there, holding a handwritten note and her phone. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't deserve what happened. I filmed it. I hope that was okay." Mavis looked up, one eye still bruised. She nodded once, slowly. Then, to Kennedy's surprise, Mavis asked, "Did it help?" Kennedy didn't know how to answer. But later that night, the video reached 1.2 million views. 3 days after the video went viral, there was still no formal statement from the Jackson Police Department. Officer Travis Holt had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, which the public quickly interpreted as, "He's going to get away with it." News anchors danced around the facts. Some questioned whether Mavis had aggressively resisted. One network invited a retired officer who said, "Sometimes, civilians escalate these things." The silence stung more than the punch. Inside her small home, Mavis sat at her kitchen table in the same yellow dress she had worn that day. It was stained and torn at the sleeve, but she refused to throw it away. Her bruises had darkened, but her eyes remained clear. On the table beside her sat a pad of thick, lined paper. She had not spoken publicly, but she had decided to write. The first draft came slowly. Her hand shook, but once the ink flowed, so did everything else. "To the officer who struck me. You don't know me. You didn't ask my name. You didn't see a grandmother. You didn't see a woman. You saw an inconvenience, maybe a nuisance. But let me tell you what you struck. You struck the hands that once caught babies in delivery rooms. You struck the arms that carried groceries for neighbors who couldn't walk. You struck the knees that bent to scrub floors in homes that never offered a glass of water. You didn't just punch me. You punched history, survival, and dignity. But I'm still here. I'm not asking you for justice. I am not asking you to say sorry. I am just asking you to remember, I am somebody's everything." When she finished writing, she folded the letter and handed it to Kennedy, who had stopped by again to check on her. "Do what you want with it," Mavis said. "If nobody reads it, that's okay. I just wanted it said." Kennedy posted a picture of the letter, just the handwritten lines, no video this time. But this letter did something the video couldn't. It went beyond the screen. It was shared by civil rights leaders, teachers, pastors, and celebrities. Within 24 hours, the letter had been read aloud on national television by an anchor who choked on her words. A university professor printed it and handed it to her students as a required reading. At the federal courthouse in D.C., Judge Malcolm Reeves stood holding the same letter printed out, slightly crumpled, and stared at it like it was a verdict. He had seen thousands of statements in his career. None had struck him like this. The letter was not angry. It was not demanding. It was unbreakable. He knew what he had to do. And that's how it began, a quiet storm building in the heart of justice, born not from a shout, but from a woman who refused to stay invisible. The courthouse in Jackson had never seen a crowd like this. On the morning of the public hearing, a line of people stretched around the building, elders in church hats, students in protest shirts, parents holding the hands of young children. They weren't there for a trial. They were there for a statement from the system. Inside the courtroom, Officer Travis Holt sat in a navy suit, stiff and pale. His lawyer leaned in, whispering strategy. Across from them, a podium had been set for public remarks. Cameras were allowed. The city couldn't hide this anymore. Judge Malcolm Reeves flew in overnight from D.C. He wasn't on the docket, but he had made one phone call to the Chief Justice of Mississippi. "I need to preside," he said. Now he stood at the bench in full robes. Silence fell when he entered. Mavis Coleman was not in the room yet, but her presence was felt. Her letter had been printed, framed, and placed on a small easel to the left of the bench. The bailiff called the hearing to order. Then the city's internal affairs chief spoke. His voice trembled. "We've reviewed the footage, the public response, and the officer's conduct. While Officer Holt claims he feared for public obstruction, the department recognizes the excessive use of force. However, no formal charges have yet been filed." A ripple of disgust moved through the crowd. Then Travis's lawyer stepped forward. "My client acted in accordance with training." He responded to what he perceived as a potential public safety concern. "The video lacks context." "Context?" A woman shouted from the crowd. Judge Reeves raised a hand. "Let her speak." It was Kennedy Hill. She walked forward. Not trembling, not unsure. She spoke. There was context. A black woman collapsed. That was the context. You don't punch context in the face. Applause broke out. Then the door opened, and in walked Mavis Coleman. She wore the same yellow dress. It had been washed and mended, but the tear on the sleeve remained. She walked slowly, but her back was straight. Her eyes did not search for pity. She did not speak. She stood in front of Travis Holt, and he couldn't meet her gaze. Then, slowly, Judge Reeves rose. He stepped down from the bench, walked toward Mavis, and, in front of everyone, he knelt. I was raised by this woman, he said, voice cracking. She is why I sit where I sit. And she was punched like a criminal. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. I cannot undo what was done, Reeves continued. But I can say, it will not be ignored. He returned to the bench. This court recommends full criminal investigation against Officer Holt and a civil review of the department's bias protocol. And to Ms. Coleman, on behalf of every institution that failed you, I am sorry. The courtroom rose. Not for Holt, but for her. Weeks passed. The hearings faded from the headlines, but something deeper had taken root. Mavis Coleman didn't want fame. She didn't want interviews. She refused every speaking engagement and politely declined a documentary filmmaker who flew in from New York. I've already said what I needed to say, she told him, in ink. But her letter had become more than just words. Schools printed it. Churches read it aloud. One artist painted her portrait beneath the line, I am somebody's everything. The officer, Travis Holt, was eventually indicted. He was fired from the force and faced trial for assault. But Mavis didn't attend. She said she'd already seen enough pain to last 2 lifetimes. Instead, she returned to her backyard. The soil, dry and cracked, waited patiently. And so did the children. It began with Kennedy Hill's idea to help restore Mavis's garden. She rallied classmates, friends, and neighbors. A carpenter donated wood for raised beds. The local nursery brought compost and seeds. One Saturday morning, nearly 50 people showed up with gloves and shovels. Mavis stood on her porch, tears on her cheeks. It was the same porch where she'd once sat in silence, holding an ice pack to her bruised face. Now, it echoed with laughter, the thump of hose breaking soil, and the sound of small feet running. A week later, Mayor Lorna Jacobs visited the site. She didn't bring cameras, just a proclamation. By order of the city of Jackson, this place shall now be known as the Mavis Coleman Community Garden, open to all, protected by law, and dedicated to dignity. Mavis said nothing, just took the certificate and tucked it behind her heart. One late afternoon, Kennedy returned to help water the tomatoes. Mavis handed her a folded napkin with a message scribbled on it. The system never expected me to stand, but they never expected you to kneel. Kennedy read it twice. And then, she hugged her. That fall, a small plaque was added to the entrance of the garden. It read, Here grows justice, from bruises, from silence, from seeds.